Hey, what is going on, team? Welcome back to another Crypto Charge Super Stream. We have pivoted from doing pre-recorded content a couple times a week and putting them out here for you guys to going live 3 times a week on multiple platforms. Right now, YouTube X. We'll be expanding to TikTok and Instagram once we are able to organize the just cleanliness of being able to stream all at once and not one of you guys having a less than good quality experience with our stream. So, if you guys haven't had the opportunity, you guys can go watch the other two live streams from last week. We talked quite a bit about Casper on our first one, talking, about some of the developments of the roadmap, talking about the listing in the US via Kraken. We're going to be doing some content on Wednesday as well on Casper. We're going to be doing a follow-up in relation to the interview that was done on Crypto Town Hall with Michael Stoyers. Some good stuff in there that I think is worth you guys hearing about. Today specifically, we're going to get into Zcash, Ondo, a little bit of news on both fronts. I know a lot of you guys are especially interested in Ondo, if not already own Ondo. Zcash is something that we've covered on this channel extensively, and I think a lot of people like to hop on the bandwagon and say, oh no, I've always loved privacy in Zcash. No, you didn't, I promise, because I can show you guys the years of content we made on Zcash and trying to, really push the idea of an undervalued Dino coin with, high tech and really great privacy elements to it. And we had to make some changes to our position. We got some fundamental news that changed, and we'll recap some of that here. We're not going to linger on the orchard pool forever and ever, but we are getting very close to Ironwood implementation. So excited to talk a little bit about those updates. Also an update with Ondo, as more into relations of like what the token can technically offer in the future. As of right now, it doesn't change any of the immediate value necessarily of what you hold as a governance token, but there are some changes that I think are net positive and probably a realistic approach to the markets, kind of in hand with some of the things we're talking about with Casper. And some people don't like a certain level of centralization, but I really think that there's some maturity in the space that occurs where you have to accept some decentralization, compromise for higher level of functionality and just understanding how to service your customers, service the problem a little bit more cleanly. So very excited to get into all of that. Before we do get into any of this, I want to make sure that you guys know that we come from cryptocharge.com. I've been doing this about 5 years full time now. We go live Monday through Friday over there. You guys can see there in the top right corner. This is episode 1167 today. It's my business partner, Dan Habib. He goes live once a week, usually on Tuesdays. Today was he decided to do the macro update today, but he is an expert in the macro economy. He has been doing this for a very long time, advising real estate individuals, people in the mortgage space, talking about, Fed decisions, inflation, housing market, labor market, giving you guys those insights, as well as kind of a deep dive on any news find relevant. I go live on our site 4 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. I cover the charts very extensively. We cover any key news. And we don't just take a look at the crypto market. We take a look at the stock market. We take a look at the metals, oil, dollar. We really try to give you guys that well-rounded approach because anyone can get up here and just throw you guys a handful of crypto chart and say, buy this or sell this. And I don't think that makes you an educated investor. With that as well, we also have, just a handful of selected news we put out there for you guys. We have our learning center with a lot of great resources, including the consistent investor strategy, about a 47-minute video for those of you guys who maybe feel like you dabbled a bit, but you don't really have like a strategy, understand the basics of diversification, when and how to allocate to the market, setting aside dry powder, creating an exit plan, a lot of things that people don't actually put a lot of time and thought into. For those of you guys who are short on time but enjoy written content, we do a written summary of everything we talked about on the show, so you guys can grab that there. We also have our coin library, where you guys have the ability to basically see tons of different tokens that we have in our platform with little descriptions of what they are. But you guys can look here and see our projected ROI with using our 3-step exiting. We also have short-term targets for those of you guys who are interested in more short-term trading or looking for trends. And then we have a very simple overview, giving you guys a digestible, Reader's Digest version of the analysis instead of it being, super extensive and, extremely, technical jargon. So you guys can get 30 days free on our entire platform with code YouTube. So make sure you guys take advantage of that. After that, it is 50% off. It comes out to $65 a month. And we also get access to our Discord community where you guys can ask questions. We do technical tune-up Friday. We're going to be introducing a hotline segment where you guys can call in and ask questions. So take the 30 days, guys. I'd love to see you in there. Cool. Let's get into some of the things that I wanted to talk about today, starting with Zcash. And you guys can leave some comments here if you guys have questions along the way. We're going to get through these segments and then we're going to answer some. Also going to be doing some charting at the end of the show here. So if you guys have something you'd like to see charted live, stocks, crypto, otherwise, happy to take a look. So let's get into it. So BSCN News put, is the privacy narrative finally back? Privacy and focus layer one's Monero is amongst the crypto industry's biggest weekly gainers, at least across majors. Its native XMR token is up 11% of the week after steady growth across the last 7 days. At the same time, however, Zcash token has tumbled 12% in the last week. I am going to show you guys the Zcash chart later on, and we'll also take a look at Monero because I think that makes a lot of sense here. But I really honestly do not like articles like this because they don't really paint a picture as far as, what price is done previous to this, how the structure differs to the structures that we're seeing in similar assets. Just because they're trading in the privacy narrative or within the privacy vertical doesn't automatically mean they should be seeing proportional gains. Zcash broke out well ahead of Monero. Monero really hasn't seen anywhere close to the equivalent breakout that Zcash has. It's had a very different correctional pattern. It's been in a long-term accumulation pattern since we broke into those highs closer to $700. So I'm going to show you guys the side-by-side here, but this is kind of like a misleading narrative, I think, that people like to utilize to kind of say, oh, see, it's a Monero thing. We're going to talk again about some of the things that I'm still a little bit nervous about with current state of Zcash. I have reduced my position down to just 10% of my total position, but again, this is with a sub $50 entry, so no tears to be had here. This is a write-up within a blog on the Zcash community, and I wanted to read a little excerpt out of here for you guys, a couple little excerpts, just to kind of catch you guys up or at least refresh your minds on what's been happening with Orchard, and give a little bit of color there before we talk more about what's happening with Ironwood and kind of like most recent update. So read a little bit here. You can think of Orchard as a privacy vault. The key feature of this vault is that outsiders cannot see how much each person deposited, who paid whom, and where the money came from or where it went. This is exactly where Zcash privacy value comes from. But even though the vault protects privacy, it still needs a very strict internal set of cash verification and accounting rules to make sure nobody can create fake money out of thin air. The Orchard issue was not that the privacy was broken. It was not that the user transaction histories were exposed. The real issue was the verification rulebook once contained a serious flaw. In theory, an advanced attacker could have convinced the system to accept a transaction that should not have been accepted and thereby create counterfeit Zcash inside the Orchard pool. Very simple summary of what happened, right? And this is going to be one of the most difficult things within the community that we're going to have to flesh out until we see full migration, and after that see that there's enough time this past where there aren't redemptions that are being rejected because turnstile count has been reached. But it's the fact that something could have occurred, the opportunity was present, but because of the privacy layer, we don't have the ability to have 100% certainty as to it did or did not happen, regardless of probability modeling. So yes, this was serious, but serious does not mean it already happened. The key distinction is a key vulnerability existed does not equal confirmed exploitation. Theoretical counterfeiting was possible is not equal to counterfeiting has been proven. Unable to prove with absolute certainty has nothing to do with happened, is not reasonable to evidence that something likely did happen. Public information indicates that the vulnerability has been remedied. So far, there are no evidence of exploitation, no detected unauthorized Zcash creation, and Zcash overall supply remains consistent through turnstile accounting, which again, guys, only measures how much Zcash is coming in and out, right? It does when you have a big migration, you force everyone out of the pool eventually, and everyone needs to move into the newest protocol, which is going to be Ironwood. You can still have those redemptions reached through turnstile, right? So and the system doesn't know the difference. It doesn't know the difference between legitimate Zcash and counterfeit Zcash. It just knows this is how much came into the pool and this is how much is allowed to come out. And you may not even be the person who created those counterfeit tokens or notes, and you could still be the person left holding the bag if you're last man out, right? The real issue is residual uncertainty. Because Orchard is a privacy pool, the chain does not directly reveal the full source and destination of every transaction. After the fix, the community can verify many surrounding facts, such as overall supply, pool inflows and outflows, and transparent site data, but it's difficult to cryptographically prove that absolutely nobody ever exploited it in the past, and that's where the market fear comes from. This is a very rational approach, and if you made this statement, which I did and really argued with a lot of people on X, about really like why I reduced my position and why I do think it's something to, take seriously, is because you, even after all of this, can never, ever, ever reconstruct the state of what happened inside of Orchard Pool. It's what we're really counting on is if there is going to be any inflation that occur, that we're going to be able to look at, dormant accounts, lost coins, and those will make up for the difference. I don't know if I like that from a fundamental level, or if I like that from a fairness level, because it really, even you're saying, okay, well, there's no more Zcash in circulation, but at some point we allowed for somebody to redeem Zcash that should not have been redeemed, right? Um, as far as next steps, though, Zcash activates its Ironwood NU 6.3 network upgrade tomorrow, block around 3 million for, you guys can read that. Introducing a new shielded pool, quantum recoverability features, and stronger supply verification via the turnstile mechanism. So I, deep down in my heart, guys, I still hold 10% of my position. If I really was like, no, I'm positive, I know for a fact that this is, been hacked, that there is a ton of counterfeit Zcash in the Orchard pool, we'd be sitting at 0%, right? But I didn't want to eliminate the entire position in the event that we really have some very positive news. My bigger fear is not so much that, even the amount of inflation is a tremendous amount. All you have to see is a tiny trickle, right? You could have one person that's, last man out, you have, million in, million out. Person who tries to redeem the very next Zcash says, I can't redeem Zcash, even if there's not very much left in the Orchard pool. That creates a very visceral market reaction. And I just don't want to be caught with my pants down, right? I've sat through a lot of tough things, sat through, SEC v Ripple Labs suit, a lot of, rough narrative with XRP. Because I was up so much on my position, it just made sense to me to make that reduction. You get an amazing Zcash re-entry price later on. We've seen that the new pool looks stable, great. But until then, I'm just going to go ahead and sit on the sidelines. Something here that we just wanted to cover very briefly. This is from July 23, so from a few days ago, but from Zcash Shielded News. Read a couple of excerpts for you guys here. The protocol sessions focused on Ironwood, the retirement of Zcash D, Project Take-On, private information retrieval, and the long-term path towards a post-quantum Zcash. Participants also shared a broad consensus in delivering Take-On remains the ecosystem's next major protocol priority. This is something I think is interesting, that they're kind of bundling up here, with their solution or patch to what we saw in the Orchard pool, and trying to rid away the worries of insolvency, is really bringing in the quantum proof narrative, which is something Michael Starr talked about in this most recent interview. We've seen Ripple write a lot of great articles on quantum proof. You have I would say as a whole, a lot of money pouring into research on quantum development and making sure that our existing technology doesn't get squashed out because of the advancements in quantum technology. Also down here, just reviewing and recapping everything as far as the next steps for Zcash. On July 18 at Blockade, Zcash D reached its planned end of support halt, making the end of software that launched the Zcash network in 2016 and powered by every network upgrade over the past decade. Network continues uninterrupted on Zebra, Zakura, and Zollet, replacing the legacy Zcash D wallet. As the ecosystem prepares for upcoming Ironwood upgrade, the transition completes Zcash's migration from its original Bitcoin-derived node software to a new generation of Rust-based infrastructure. Let's go, right? Rust, Solidity, those are like the bee's knees when it comes to coding in blockchain, coding in DLT. Very familiar languages that if you offer at least one of those in your tech stack, in your SDK, you have a much higher chance of adoption in general. So glad to see there's still progress, rooting for everything to be as copacetic as possible, but just sharing with you guys some of the things that, concerned about, things that I think about, and some words of caution, right? You guys can also track, if you guys want, the Ironwood migration right here on their dashboard. Obviously, we have nothing that's been migrated yet because it hasn't gone live, but we'll be able to watch this in real time. So this is the dashboard where we're going to wait and see what happens, right? How quickly do we see that migration to Ironwood? Does it fill up super quick? What percentage of users lag behind and decide not to make that migration and just stay in the Orchard pool longer? Does a greater portion of total supply end up being more dormant because people don't make the transition right away to Ironwood? We'll see, but these are going to be the ways that we can at least peer into a little bit of that progress. Let's talk a little bit about Ondo here as well, and then we'll get into the charts. So Ondo launches new execution network, calling it Evolution of Ondo Chain. Let's read here this first green highlight. The new network is being announced publicly for the first time. Ondo CEO told The Block he described it as an evolution of Ondo Chain, the company's previous blockchain. Asked whether the Ondo network is effectively replacing Ondo Chain, he said it's implementation of what we originally set out to do with Ondo Chain. I'd frame it more as an evolution, but we will not be running the Ondo network and Ondo Chain in parallel. So what changed? Ondo originally planned to build a full blockchain through Ondo Chain to bring real-world assets on chain. However, while developing the Ondo Perps exchange and speaking with customers, the company concluded that execution rather than settlement was the main bottleneck. According to Ondo, traditional blockchains perform execution verification and settlement on the same ledger, providing durability and trust, but making them too slow and transparent for high-performance trading. The Ondo network instead separates execution from settlement and verification while keeping users in control of their assets. So, even when you think about any sort of system that you have, whether you're looking at, computers or cars or whatever, right? There's certain tasks that are sincerely not worthy of a certain security certificate or, of a certain type of auditing that occurs because it can, interfere. Imagine if your, car had to do an audit every 0.1 second and scan the entire car instead of the ECU having different sensors and things that are responsible. It can just pull on light pieces of data as needed and then still continue to execute, right? That's kind of what we're getting at here, is that when you separate the trading execution layer, which is very fast, when you think about the latency that occurs with most professional trading exchanges, especially OTC, they're incredibly fast. I'm sure some of you guys saw the news article. Trump wants to offer through Truth Social a premium wire for big announcements for whatever it is, whether it's for inflation events or for policy decisions. To which, of course, how is he able to offer those faster than anyone else? And it's not because he invented a great enough server; it's because he's the one delivering it. But there is a competitive edge with that, and there's a reason why professional trading firms will pay sometimes upwards of $1 million plus a year for their firm to have these super low latency wires. So when they're looking at the market, where we have, first of all, a lot of really excellent tokenization efforts and RWA occurring, where we've seen a tremendous amount of stocks come on chain, treasury bonds, all types of products in a decentralized manner, while still maintaining all of the true inherent rights that come with whatever it is, an equity or whatever the product is. So when we're able to at least split out some of the heavy workload that is going to be interrupted by audits that would need to occur by making blockchain the absolute only primary layer where everything happens, we're allowing the most important part, which is security, audits, verification, settlement confirmation occur on blockchain, but trading in itself being executed in a separate environment. Literally have no way to tell you guys right now how that's going to actually flesh out. We'll have to actually see some proper sandboxing before we can, make some judgments as to what's possible. And then even with theoretical, you have to slowly do testing outside of the sandbox, because you can have the best product in the world, but if you never take it out, in real conditions outside of your vacuum, outside of your test bench, you'll never know. Read a little bit lower here. Asked how verification and settlement work under the new architecture, Bode said the decentralized network of attesters determines which code the secure hardware enclaves are allowed to run, effectively verifying that the approved code is being executed. Asset transfers currently settled on Ethereum with support for additional blockchains planned. Read a little bit lower here. Oops. Back out of this. Sorry about that, guys. Nope, that was me tripping out here. I want you guys to think about this with what this really means, is that this allows the Ondo governance token to potentially have more value, right? Because if we're going to be splitting the workload here and, a lot of the executions being done elsewhere, incentivizing watchers, incentivizing attesters, very likely that we'll be utilizing Ondo more heavily for those particular applications. That would be the at least like short-term bullish optimistic approach to take with this, but it's not a guarantee this is what's happening. It's what I'm interpreting, though, from the way that, first of all, governance is not changing as of right now, but you think about those two different workflows, it's very likely that we're going to see the Ondo token used in a very different way than it's being used now, which I think what a lot of people are griping with. They don't like that it's just governance, but I think that it's also interesting that we own other projects or in other protocols where you don't have any governance rights. Maybe it's for native gas, but you don't get to actually participate in voting on the network. So how decentralized is it, right? It's kind of a little bit of an Ouroboros argumentation there, but those are the main things here. We're going to get through the charts here and take a look at some of that stuff, but I want to take a look at the comments here. And Gavin, we have anything in the comments before we take a look at our first segment here in the charts? Hype is a great coin. You know, I haven't really like done extensive research on like what hype has to offer. We've looked at the chart quite a bit because it's been something that people have been tracking really heavily. I know Arthur Hayes was couldn't get more hyped about hype and just kind of dumped everything, you know, like after several weeks of just being super bullish and excited while the market was hot. We can definitely take a look at the chart here if you guys are interested in taking a look at that because it's been interesting. I know we have more price history than this. Here we go. It's the pith chart. So one thing that I like about the hype chart or the hyperliquid chart, we've done an excellent job of breakout backtest behavior in here. So we had this initial launch pricing, broke out of it here, no backtest, firmly backtested over here in January. You see the higher low lock in, and then we just stair step all the way up. So that distribution was resolved, and then we broke up and away. So here's the only thing that I'll have to say short term about this chart. What I told people, especially when it broke out, if you're looking for a short term play, that you needed to at least wait for these local highs. People saw this in here and they started panicking, right? So always wait for that breakout back test. You know, you have found good support on top of this distribution structure in here. I will point to this though. If I'm going to be super picky about this and say like, where's the major spot on this chart that hasn't been resolved? And I say this because it has done such a good job up to this point of, even though taking longer periods of time, coming back and doing a proper back test, that imbalance around $44 is still wide open. That would be probably, to me, if I'm going to really buy a true deep technical value, it's going to be down in here. Now, can you maintain these highs in here? Sure. But there's a lot more price action closer to $44 than there is $53. You know, this is the true major imbalance. When you look at what has occurred on the way up, broke out, back tested immediately, broke out, back tested, right? You've had that behavior the whole way up. So that's going to be the area of interest I'd be watching for there. If you guys are wanting to use some extension-based targets, I'd go from the high here from September of last year down to the January low. And you look around $82 as that main area of interest. So if you were to able to grab like a $44 entry or so, which would be ideal, it's upwards of like an 88% move up into that first extension at the 1.618 there. Dustin, what's up, brother? Once we see how Zcash Ironwood update plays out, what's your best case and worst case predictions for Zcash? You know, it's I know that we've done a great job with our entry here. I know a lot of us have taken at least some reduction out of our position. But let's kind of just walk through best case, worst case scenario for Zcash. I think that's a fair question. So very big picture, if we come out to the weekly here, just so we can see where prices come from. The all-time high here from 2018 is right around $900. I don't really count a lot of this in here as real all-time highs. It's just very illiquid. It doesn't show that there was actually a lot of trading that occurred in there. You know, you just had straight down action and terrible market timing here. So I look at these areas of interest here, somewhere between like 300 and then up here close to like this $900 region, and that's probably a more reasonable local top. We built a beautiful rounded base in here for an extraordinary amount of time. We've got that level in there. We'll talk about that more in a moment here. And then we've got this level here like around 114. All right. So if we're kind of putting Ironwood and the how the market may react if the fundamental picture isn't as, you know, kosher as everyone's expecting. I think that the main area short term that people are hoping to just hold is right around $300. And that's not just because they want prices to stay high, but because these tops in here, these tops over in here, and then you've seen that we've negotiated this area pretty decently as support since then. We did deviate all the way down to 200. You guys can see here also on the Ironwood news came down, or excuse me, on the Orchard news came down to about $250. My biggest gripe with this chart though, so if we're going to kind of apply that same logic that we just talked about with the hype chart, there is a huge massive imbalance all the way down here at 114 and even down here closer to like $80 or so. That's the main area that really should have been back tested. And I think a lot of people are wishing this away in their heads because they're like, oh no, but it's performed so well and it doesn't have to. Well, look what Solana, XRP, and ETH did now, right? After being at those safe, lofty prices for a long time. You know, market's in a different position. Zcash has been in a different position this whole time. You know, you have to lose a couple floors of support for that to occur. But I think worst case scenario, let's say that you see not just a little bit, you get a widespread, you know, reports of inability to redeem after, you know, Ironwood turnstiles have reached max redemption capacity, I could see us easily coming down to like the $60 to $114 mark. I think that's probably worst case scenario. Best case scenario, you maintain somewhere between 220 and 300. That's going to be your key support in there. If you were to take a look at the extension based targets, take these drawings away. The targets that we had built a very long time ago are somewhere still between 1400 and beyond. I'm recommending that my team be out by 1400 or so. If you're going to stay in some, I would really try to keep a little bit in there. Too many people are afraid that they're going to, get rid of their only runner, their only winner. But the reality is you got to sell into strength, right? Nobody's going to say it's time to sell, as we're in these really, really peaky moments. The upside reward is becoming very small at this point, right? Even from current market at that $1,400 mark, we're talking about a 200% gain. I mean, it's not nothing, but like for real, like I just don't really see the point in trying to talk ourselves into, either buying more, holding extensive amounts. I just think there's better opportunity out there, even if we're going to kind of take out the fundamental picture in there. The other thing that I look at is the more immediate range in here. We come down to the daily. And then we're going to compare this to Monero really quick before we finish up. This is a completely different structure than Monero because of how it broke out and how it corrected in a very different capacity. 1080 is what you get as the first extension based target, and you get like 1630 as that next target at the 2.618. So I think best case for Zcash, maybe it gets out to a couple grand by end of cycle. I just don't know how much juice is in the tank, and there still is a floating fundamental question. Really couldn't tell you for absolute certain what the true outcome is. Other thing we're looking at here on the daily is the 50-day moving average is holding right now. This is the 50% fib as far as the range that we've selected in here. But I would say downside risk is like 316 or so if you're not able to maintain this 50-day moving average. And this is something that we called for as we were unable to get over that 702. That was more likely that we retest close to that 460 mark, and we have just about done it. Flipping to a two panel here just so you guys can see what's going on with XMR USD. And we'll grab the aggregated chart here. And you were to look at kind of the price action that's occurred. So let's look at the price action here on Zcash here. This is from November of last year to current. So we will grab a equivalent zone here. So this is the equivalent here would be, what is this, October 28. Pull out a little bit more. So if you look at the Monero versus Zcash picture, it has not been anywhere close to identical. It's been two completely different structures. So the peak in here was a lot more violent here in January, but the recovery structure and the way that it has rebalanced itself are very, very different. When you look at Zcash and the strength that it's built in here, Zcash has actually built a more confident set of higher highs and higher lows, where Monero here has really been just like in a very choppy range bound situation. Now we have been maintaining for the most part, like this $300 mark here on Monero pretty decently well. You are struggling with the MAs in here, and you've also been trading still above most of the major MAs. So that's the main reason why I don't like that article that we saw or those types of headlines, because they really try to paint like, oh, my team's doing it. And I really am very agnostic to the whole situation. I don't own any Monero. I own lots of Zcash. I own less Zcash now. I just think it's kind of a silly headline that people use to pull people into the clickbait of it all. But those are some of the things I'm considering here on the charts. Chris, can we see the H&T chart? Sure. I don't know if you want to see it right now, though. It's not pretty, but we'll take a look. And we talked quite a bit about some of the H&T updates recently, as far as supply allocation, about the changes in proof of coverage to actually getting compensated for the amount of data that you offload. I think it's positive changes. Some people don't like it, but none of this action in here is relative to any of that immediate news. None of it created new supply that was brought on market. None of it changed the tokenomics in a way that de-incentivizes miners. None of that occurred. This really, I think, has just been one of those examples of projects that unfortunately already had a little bit of negative price action rolling for them. And then when the markets turned unfavorable, just saw a lot of that liquidity siphoned out. One of the things that I think is still optimistic is that you look at where we need to see H&T or Helium pull back into in order to become I would say a liquid asset again, or to be in a spot or in a zone that's a lot more comfortable, we need to see 70 cents to $1.30 recovered. So right now I am DCAing into this. It's not very common that while the market's just collapsing like this that I'll DCA in. I had a DCA on for a while. I took my foot off the gas with the DCA. Now that we've seen the market in other sectors show a little bit of recovery and strength, I'm lowering my average here because what I'm doing is giving myself some flexibility as well. So when the market does eventually, and I know that we will see at least some retest towards 70 cents to $1.30, very worst case scenario, everything's falling apart. That's the more likely scenario. I'm giving myself a lower average price so that I have a higher level of flexibility to negotiate a trim, maybe reduce some of the position, reallocate or sit on dry powder. I personally do not think that HNT is worth turning away from right now, especially if you guys are interested, at least just watching for a fundamental picture, and tracking the charts until you see something that's a little bit more high confirmation. It's definitely a still very worthy investment vehicle. I love it as a deep end project. I don't think anyone else on the market is doing anything close to what HNT is doing right now. And the for-profit getting picked up by Noble Mobile only expands the usage of these decentralized networks. So I think it's a very unique use case. I need to see a big recovery in here. The percentage required is almost 700% to the top of that range. It's like maybe 300 to 400% to middle of that range. When you look at the market capitalization, 35 million right now. So it's gotten very low. Let me double check that I didn't grab volume by accident. No, 35 million market cap. So that puts it in the same territory as like API 3 Casper. So that even that 7x that we just talked about there is a very small amount of money we're asking for. We're asking for, hundreds of millions of dollars, not billions of dollars, in order for us to recover back into these prices. When small caps do get this beat up and they get to that small of a cap, you can see this type of volatility set in. So it is a risky play. You're banking on a turnaround play. But I think that there's a lot of fundamental value, and I'm using this opportunity to improve my average so I have flexibility on the way up. If we recover that $1.30 region, no reason why we shouldn't retest other imbalances like 327, retesting if broken above that pivot zone closer to 10. And there's a massive imbalance here at $20. That's still the holy grail. If you were to see a long-term turnaround in H&T, is that this distribution structure in here left a flagrant imbalance between 10 and $20. So I'm not going to even, try to hype that up or say we're getting to $20 next week or by end of this year or whatever. This is the immediate step that's required. For those of you guys who want to throw it on your watch list and make that addition via limit order, once you see that action set in, you want to see 70 cents retested. That's your minimum viable. So maybe you get a push towards like $1 or so, set that limit there at 71 cents. That's going to still get you a good price, but you're going to see that we're trading in a more liquid pocket. You're going to have, a little bit more confidence that you're buying a stronger floor and not just DCAing into oblivion, which right now, it's a rough situation. So I'm always honest with our team, always honest with you guys here as to what I'm doing. It's very risky, and most often than not, especially if I don't understand the project very well and I'm just charting it, I personally wouldn't just blindly DCA into it. You're from a 22-cent average, right on. So yeah, just recently started getting involved here, and this is basically the prices that Ondo launched at over here in 2020. That's the only other examples that we have of these prices in here. So it's always a good feeling if you get into a project after it's already kind of gotten his teeth kicked in and got pushed down pretty heavily. But yeah, great average there, man. Even if you didn't keep lowering your average, I think that you're in a spot where you're going to be able to have a lot of flexibility. Even if you wanted to take some trims at like that $1.30 region, 70-cent region, and maybe try to buy back a little bit lower or allocate some of it elsewhere, you get a lot of choices. So definitely great average price, and very excited to hear where you are, a few months from now, if prices improve, what those returns are looking like for you. Cool. Awesome. I'm just going to show you guys a couple other things that I have been tracking, some opportunities that I'm really trying to stay cognizant of. We saw, first of all, SpaceX really offering some crazy discounts. Everyone on social media just was like, you got to get in early, you got to buy early, it's going to just keep going up, it's never coming back. And I explained multiple times, like I have the receipts, that you have to wait for the market to relax a bit. Yes, can you catch some decent little swing trades or some more momentum-based trades off the IPO and make a little bit of money? For sure, but you got to be ready to accept that you're going to take a minimal reward, might sell a little early, might not get to sell a little early, or sometimes you see price move against you right away. IPOs are not worth it. Let the market actually tell you what it's worth, right? I don't need to desperately get in, to be the first fart in the seat, right? Like it doesn't make any sense. You saw a nice appreciation the first several days, right? We appreciated 50%. And then from there, you pretty much gave it all back. And then we've set lower lows and lower highs pretty much every day. So from IPO open price here at like 150, you guys can see that we've down 24%, almost down 27% to those lows over here. 112 bucks. This is getting to be a good deal. I'm watching for this to slip under 100 bucks, and then I'll start a little DCA. I get a little DCA going here. Also watching Intel. I have a limit open, guys. If you guys do not own anything in the chip sector, you guys are looking to get in something in the chip sector, I'm seeing exactly what I want to see out of Intel right now. We had a really big distribution structure in here. We broke below the 50-day. We broke below key support in here, rejected it again. So we're coming down to that $80 mark. It looks like it's pretty much baked into the cake, written in the stars. If you see over here, this is where we had a big top in the 2000s. And then the last time we interacted with it prior to where we're about to interact with it right now was these double tops here in 2020 and then in 2021. So this is grossly overvalued. I know that the chip market is still going to continue to be, probably quite explosive just with AI and everything else that is consuming like no other. Hopefully you guys are not trying to build a machine right now. Even like Raspberry Pis and equivalents are like more than 2x what they should be. RAM, all that stuff. It's still very expensive. So I'd like to at least hedge against myself and own some Intel at a better price. So what I'm watching for is essentially for those tops to be tested again, because we broke out of those tops from 2021 over here in April this year, and we never came back. So the fact that you don't have any evidence that there is any major areas of interest between, this broken level at 100 and these levels here, very likely those get filled out. I also think this is likely to get filled out closer to 68.70 because this is a gap. You gapped up in here. So I'm recommending a layering approach here. I would take limit 1 here at 80 and then take another limit here close to like 68 or 70. I'd be happy to buy a little lower than this too, but I think these are the main two areas where I'd like to get some orders in and join the market and not be like overly greedy. Those are some really, really easy things that you guys can take advantage of. If you guys want something that's outside of the immediate, crypto assets. Stock market has still remained relatively resilient, especially the Dow Jones. The 50-day moving average has acted decently as support in there. You have the Russell 2000 that's also been strong off the 50-day. S&P and NASDAQ have been spending a little bit more time below their 50-day moving average. More importantly, though, the NASDAQ, CNS break below these lows here from June does show a little bit of weakness. So I could see the equity markets pulling down towards let's say 26K for the NASDAQ. That would hurt, but no back test in there. So I'm watching for some of these correctional moves. Coinbase is trying to get back over that 50-day and the 200-week, keeping a very close eye on Coinbase. I'm DCing a little bit of XRP right now. We rejected the 50-day moving average in here. So underneath the $1.30 is an absolutely fantastic price. This is one of those few things where I'm actually technically raising my average with XRP by purchasing here. But I think that we're very close to locking in that higher low. So I don't really think that I'm introducing a lot of risk by doing so and increasing my XRP positioning there. I also been buying a little bit of Casper as of recent, not a ton, little limit order every day over on Kraken. I do recommend that you guys use limit orders. If you guys are not people who use limit orders, I don't know what you're doing. You're really not setting yourself up for success by giving them a bunch of money by executing at market. Just be patient. Sometimes it takes a few minutes, but there's no reason not to just use the limit, and you'll pay way, way less in fees. Plenty of other things in the market that we talk about over at cryptocharge.com. Everything you guys see on my list here, including the dollar, 10-year, metals, indices. We'll take a look at those more closely. On Fridays, we do Tactical Tune-Up Friday, where you guys can bring your picks and we chart them live on the show. You guys have the opportunity to be a part of this type of analysis every single day, as well as see things that you're curious about brought on the shows. So again, guys, you guys can check us out at cryptocharge.com. Code YouTube gets you guys 30 days completely free. That's everything. That's the website. Live updates Monday through Friday. Written summaries. We have other macro summaries that are updated on a roller basis. Learning Center, Coin Library, Discord, all that. 30 days free, and then $65 a month after that if you guys use code YouTube. So hope to see you guys in there soon. Really enjoying doing these super streams with you guys, and looking forward to our next one on Wednesday. Cheers.